Welcome to the webinar, Data-Driven Dentistry, Unlocking the Power of Analytics and AI to Transform Your Practice. This lecture is being presented by Dr. Brian Laskin, and we will begin shortly. And now it is my distinct honor to welcome back Dr. Brian Laskin. Using 20 years of experience providing dental care to anxious patients, Dr. Laskin's passion to reduce stress for the dental industry through innovation, education, and standardization. Through his multiple businesses, Upgrade Dental, Digital Nitrous, Opera DDS, and Tooth Apps, and being an author of the book, The Patient First Manifesto, Dr. Laskin excels at integrating technology and treatment into practices. He plays an active role at several progressive dental organizations, and he serves as counsel to leading dental companies, including ours. He's on our CE advisory board. Through participation at the Dental Standards Institute's groundbreaking workshops, Dr. Laskin is giving patients a voice, as well as creating important guidelines for emerging technologies. And with that, I get to say, take it away, Dr. Laskin.
Thank you, Jessica. Very much appreciate it. I'm going to share my screen now for everybody. And like Jessica said, if you have comments or suggestions, just place them in the chat below. And we should have time at the end for me to answer anybody's questions. Or if you know, nothing that I say is sacred. And I want to thank all of you for showing up today. I know how challenging it is sometimes to take time out of your busy lives and sort of level up your education. So I want to thank you all for being here. And of course, thanks Jessica and NDX Laboratory. I'm just always continuously impressed with how NDX is working so hard to level up their education. And so I very much appreciate being here. Sort of in means of disclosure, my name is Brian Laskin. I am part of several different companies, like Jessica mentioned. Tooth Apps is handling the data management within dentistry, I would say. And so what we're going to be talking about today is a lot about data and how to leverage it for your practice. We'll talk about some specifics, but also some high level, how you should be looking at this holistically so that regardless of your organization, whether you're a single location or 1,000 location DSO, hopefully you can go back tomorrow and start making some actionable changes to really level up your practice, your care, and your profitability based on what we talk about today. So this is Data-Driven Dentistry, unlocking the power of analytics and AI to transform your practice, which is something that I'm very excited about, and hopefully we can have a little bit of a discussion at the end. Our goals for today are fairly simple. So number one, we're going to be gaining certainty on how to identify and remove the largest barriers to growth. So we'll be talking about some of those barriers and how to remove them. Understand why data drives confidence in your patients and your team. I think people talk a lot about data now, big data and how to leverage information. We're going to be talking specifically about how to leverage data for your practice, and learn how to get your team excited about data. Because it's not really about the data, it's about the results that your data can provide. So starting off, I want to talk high level, what tends to happen in a dental practice when it sort of the operational workflow within a dental practice. And many of you probably have felt like this, where, when you hit a peak of production, you feel like you're running on a treadmill, trying to get things, you got to really get things cooking to grow, and then you hit a ceiling. And when you hit the ceiling, inevitably you burn out a little bit and you go down through a dip. And when you get to that dip, maybe you lose a key employee, or maybe you have to have a key employee step up and rely on people to sort of get the ball moving again, right? And then what invariably happens is you put forth all of this effort. Maybe you're really focusing on your treatment planning versus production, and then all of that starts taking effect, and you ramp it back up until you crash out again. And what ends up happening is we go through these cycles of high production, low production, and we don't really know what's going on. And in fact, I was talking to a consulting group yesterday that's leveraging our analytics platform, and they were talking about they said the optimal range in of new patients or patients seen by a dentist to actually increase the profitability of the practice. Because if you go to see too many people, then you're probably not treatment planning enough because you're running from room to room. And if you don't see enough people, obviously, then you don't have the patients to do the work on. And so there's this sweet spot, and we can leverage data to get that in it for get to that sort of sweet spot of profitability, sweet spot of streamlining, and really, of not working too hard, but working hard enough. Because if we go up and down and I've been on this I was on this treadmill basically for the first 15 years of my career. And, at the end of it, you could end up like Dr. Pete Smith here, who, at the age of 38 looks like this. Obviously it's a joke, but it is, I mean, it is not it's not a good roller coaster to be on, right? It makes your work life a lot more haggard, and then of course we don't show up as our best for our patients and for our teams. So a little math that, some data here that I want to talk about to sort of illustrate, again, big picture, some information that you want to just think about when it comes to your dental practice. The average dental practice has 1,500 patients. Now, this is for a single dentist. So obviously, if there's two dentists, it's typically 3,000 patients. So that means that, if you have 4 operatories, which is average per dentist, then for one operatory, you have 500 patients. And that seems to make a lot of sense, right? So you have 4 operatories for a single dentist. Typically, there's a couple assistants, 2 hygienists, and then maybe 1 person working, in the business office per dentist. Well, and it sounds great until you think about it a little bit. What ends up happening is that, if you think about this from a growth perspective, let's say you had 50 new patients a month, which is good, but not unheard of at all, right? That's 600 patients a year. That means that you should be adding an operatory every single year, because you're still accounting for 100 patients, while leaving your practice pretty much. So if you're growing, you should be adding operatories pretty much every year, but that's not what most dentists do. What most dentists that I talk to, if they have a 4 operatory practice, they end up having 4 operatory practice for 10, 20 years. And if the math just doesn't pencil out, right? And so why aren't more practices adding an operatory every single year if they're getting 15 new patients a month? Now, obviously, if you're getting 25 new patients a month, then maybe you should be adding an operatory every 2 years. But even most practices aren't doing that, right? Because all of those hygiene patients have dental needs too. And it really comes down to data, right? So the answer is, if you look at it sort of at the highest level of just the number of patients that you have and the number of new patients you're having, then we should know predictably how we're going to have to expand the capacity of our practice. And over the 20 years that I was seeing patients, we grew from an 800 square foot space to an 8,000 square foot space, and then added a second location because of this math. Now, it's pretty simplistic, right? If you think about it, your net new patient growth is the number of new patients you get coming in the front door, so minus the lost patients, so the patients that are leaving the back door, and then of course you can add back the patients that you've recaptured. Now, so that's a quick way to look at this math, and then you can calculate based on your needs how many operatories you should have, how many operatories you should be adding over time, and you can plan for expansion. Now, of course, what I tend to find is that practices are very well aware of the number of new patients that they're having coming in the front door, but they're not paying attention to how many going out the back door. And the reality is, and we'll talk more about this later, it is much, if you read the studies, and it's well known that you can, for far less cost, you can retain patients, you can have them refer patients than to go out and spend marketing to get new patients in the front door. So being able to recapture those patients that many times they just fell through the cracks is a big way to grow, to keep your practice growing in the right direction. So that's one kind of aspect of what we're going to high level of how you can leverage data to grow your practice, and we'll talk about more. But we're specifically today going to go through 7 barriers to practice growth. These are the things that I'm seeing that people do most commonly to hamper their growth. And we can talk, in detail about more about any of these. But these are high level information data sources that I would recommend you look at. So number one is feelings, not data. Getting new patients in the front door feels good. Having people leave through the back door feels bad. And just bluntly speaking, that's why we look at the new patient numbers and not the lost patients. I mean, I did the exact same thing when I was leveraging data in my practice. At first, I was looking at the numbers that make you feel good, not the numbers that make you feel bad. But another way to look at this too is busy versus productive. If you look at, this is a obviously Target shopping mall where they have, this shows, they maybe have 5 out of 25 lanes open. Why do they have 25 cash registers when there's only 5 open? It's because a couple times a year, like Mother's Day, the day after Thanksgiving, they have to have all 25 open. But they recognize that the incremental cost of having the checkout lanes is worth it for those days where they can produce or where they can get revenue through those checkout lanes. When that comes to the dental practice, obviously, it's looking at our operatories and making sure that we have an extra operatory or 2 extra operatories, where if you have a patient come in with a broken tooth and they want to have that restoration done that day, you can take care of them. Not only are you going to be increasing your production that day, but you're going to be elevating the patient experience so that then you can, that they're going to be more likely to refer others. And so it's very dangerous to run our practices based on our feelings. And so I would argue that looking at the information we're going to be talking about, over the course of tonight is vital. Starting off with how many people are going out the back door. Another sort of word of caution or thing to think about when you're talking about practice growth is to have the right information. Having a small amount of data that you look at so that you can intimately get to be aware of the right numbers is far more important than having too much information. And what I see in a lot of business analytics dashboards in dentistry is just a whole bunch of information. We're talking massive amounts of data that's not organized well, that makes it confusing to me and other dental practitioners. So having the right amount of information is better. In fact, more information is not better. Correct information is better. So making sure that you have the right metrics to look at. And if anybody's interested, we can talk about the right metrics, and we have a list of the 15 KPIs that any dental practice should be following. But in reality, just having a simple, clean dashboard like this, where you can see things like your net new patients, your production numbers, your collections, your profitability, that's not on here, but being able to not just look at how much money is coming in the front door, but going out the back door, right? Because profit equals income minus expenses. Having those numbers, profitability is key, because there's also been many, many months where I felt tired and worn out and then was wondering where the money went. And then other days where I'm just like, didn't even feel like I worked that hard and they were massively profitable. So being able to check those numbers while not being distracted from superfluous numbers is vitally important. And so I would recommend getting together a custom dashboard that you can track it. So I mentioned this a little bit ago. Number 3 is looking at your production versus profitability. So being able to look at your expenses and categorize them, and oftentimes the most expensive expense is our people, right? Which obviously, if we, usually in a dental practice, about 50% of the cost is wages, and that's been going up obviously with wage inflation. So making sure that you're on top of your profitability, especially during COVID, our costs, and now obviously costs have just skyrocketed, and insurance companies have put a cap obviously on what we can charge for things if you do take insurance. And so I see more and more dental practices dropping insurance, and but those decisions should be database decisions, and to do that you have to know kind of what the costs are, and things like case acceptance, as you see here. Now, a little story about this is my dental practice. It's the building that my practice is in now, although I sold my practices. But when I sold my practices, I actually had a thriving practice, was very much in tune with, and every quarter would get together with my accountant, and I always worked with a consultant. And when I went to sell my practices to a DSO, they said, well, we would guess that your EBITDA, or loosely it's profitability, is X. And so they told me the number. And I'm embarrassed to say that I just said, yeah, that sounds right, about right. And I had no idea. I had no idea what the profitability of my practice was when I sold. Luckily, I was quite profitable, so that number was pretty much spot on. However, I would urge anybody who is running a dental practice now, if you own a dental practice, even if you're not the owner, to figure out your profitability, because it's been rapidly changing over the last few years, and it's getting more challenging to maintain profitability. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much you produce, because and profitability, I like to say the numbers tell a story. And what profitability says is that you're a good fiduciary for the business of your practice. And the reason why that's important is you can't invest in the best, lab, education, people, technology, without having a profitable business. And so having a profitable business means that you can provide the highest quality care and the highest quality experience for your team. And so I would urge you to make sure that don't just look at production numbers, look at profitability. Number 4, busy versus effective. I fell into this myself a lot, wanting to feel busy. It's very easy to do non-productive tasks like sealants or adjustments or things that auxiliary team members can do, when we can be doing higher level procedures, because we want to be doing something. When I say we, I mean me and the people that I've worked with. But I think in general, I've had many associates throughout the years, and oftentimes have to talk to them about, it doesn't matter how busy you are. If your schedule is busy, it means that you're busy. And I like to equate this to somebody who's working on a computer, maybe taking call in the business office of your practice, and they're complaining. They say, what, my hands are hurting from typing so much, right? And so they say, would like an ergonomic keyboard. So instead of typing all the time and having my wrists hurt, I'd like to get an ergonomic keyboard to alleviate my pain. Well, in reality, what would be even better is to get paperless forms, so that you can eliminate data entry altogether, right? So focusing on the most productive things to eliminate tasks that you don't even need to do. So in the case of paperless forms, you can have the patient filling out forms on any device, right? And then there's no data entry for your team members. And then you can go from having an overwhelmed practice that's busy doing intake forms and sending out statements and following up with past due clients, to automate tasks, leveraging these, paperless forms, but also leveraging AI to, as we'll talk about in a little bit, but you can leverage artificial intelligence for these forms to make sure that your patients are getting the right forms. And also that when they filled them out correctly, so that your team members don't need to be on the phone with insurance companies and following up. Number 5, especially when looking at data, looking at team performance versus individual. This is something that I see people doing all of the time, thinking, well, boy, let's look at the production of Dr. A, Dr. B, hygienist C, hygienist D. Dentistry is a team sport. And it's like, looking at the individual statistics, if you've watched the movie Moneyball, the individual statistics are very much trumped by the statistics of how the team members perform collectively when they're working together as a team. So what does that look like in dentistry? Here's what that looks like. When we're talking about case acceptance, if you're looking at case acceptance by dentist, right? Dr. Fox and Dr. Miller here have relatively similar case acceptance, 72% versus 78%. But look at the numbers below. Look at Jeffries as the hygienist. Okay, Jeffrey, when working with Dr. Miller, has a 46% case acceptance rate, but Jeffrey, working with Dr. Fox, has a 100% case acceptance rate. Similarly with Tom, we're talking a swing over 25% with Dr. Miller and Dr. Fox. Why would that be? Well, in this case, if you look, Dr. Miller is a general dentist and Dr. Fox is a periodontist. So the likelihood, I would argue, because the numbers are relatively even throughout, when we talk about presented treatment, the reason for this would probably be because the hygienist, Jeff, is probably diagnosing and doing more perio work like scaling rip planing or work that the periodontist, Dr. Fox, is doing. Whereas Tom is treatment planning more restorative work. Now, you could argue one or the other, but having the data of how people work together is vitally important. Similarly, if you haven't done personality tests like a Colby, or if you have, seeing how people work together, how people's personalities mesh within your office can be very enlightening. You can actually take, one of the things I would recommend is taking, if you have done personality tests like Colby that quantifies certain aspects of personality, or a Myers-Briggs, you can actually take it into an LLM like ChatGPT, and you can upload those Colby scores or those Myers-Briggs scores and ask it how you should work together as a team. And it will actually give you some really good insights into that. Now, so when it comes to case acceptance, again, individual data is important, but really how people work together, I would say, is just as important. Historical data versus predictive data. This is being proactive versus reactive. This is a big one because in dentistry, we almost always use historical data. So this will probably be a little bit enlightening to most people here today. So if you think about it, when you're looking at your practice management software today, everything in there is historical, right? You've either had this appointment scheduled, you have a bunch of information that's all historical, radiographs, treatment plans, whatever. And we're at the precipice right now of being able to leverage this data in brand new ways. And one of the ways that I'm really excited about doing it is that we're going to be able to do things like this, where we can show what's called the LOMA score, or the probability that a patient's not going to show up for their appointment. So if you look at this schedule here, this is an example from our application Tooth Apps, as most of these have been. James Brown, the godfather of soul, has a 20% chance of showing up for his appointment. Now, what do we want to do about this? Well, number one, I would say that this is great information to have. This is predictive analytics that showcase the fact that James is more than likely not going to show up for his appointment. So we could reach out to James and say, for us to maintain that appointment, you need to have a non-refundable deposit. You could also put another patient that has a less than 50% chance of showing up for their appointment and double book them, and then and let them both know that, hey, based on your history, there's our predictive analytics is showing that there's the likelihood that you might not show up. Or you can just reach out and actually leverage AI, which is something else that we do, leverage AI to change the contents and cadence of the reminder system for James Brown to try to ensure the fact that he's going to show up, or at least increase the probability. Obviously Jane Abramson, who has a 90% chance of showing up to the appointment and has confirmed that appointment, is a very different situation than James Brown with a 20% chance of showing up and not confirmed. So why do we today handle Jane and James the same way, right? The answer is it doesn't make any sense, but that's the way we've been working with historical data. So being able to treat these differently can completely change the probability of people showing up and keeping your schedule more full. Internal referrals versus marketing. We talked a little bit about this before, but I want to highlight it because it's so much easier to just write a check and hope that a marketing company is going to get patients in the door. And we all know that this patient who has that phone in her hand really doesn't look like this today. She looks like this, right? We have everybody, myself included, has shortened attention spans. So thank you all for your attention for the last half hour. But it makes it much more challenging to reach external marketing. If you've done any pay-per-click or social media or other marketing, it is changing so fast. Right now, Google search is withering on the vine. If you use Google stuff at all, you realize how bad it is for Google because they're trying to shove AI down everybody's throats, because people under 20 today don't go to Google to search. They go right to like ChatGPT or Perplexity, and they get their answer there because they can ask a question and get the best answer, not just an answer that pays that search engine the most. So it's rapidly changing, which means that marketing is getting more and more, external marketing is getting more and more expensive. What hasn't changed is what will probably never change, which is human nature. And so providing the best experience, using the best laboratories like NDX, making sure that you provide a high quality experience for your patients, and asking for referrals and doing things to cater to the squirrel patient, as I call her, is going to be much more effective today and in the future. Of course, you can try all sorts of external marketing, but it's always been more challenging than it's been always more challenging to get external referrals to come in versus internal referrals. And it's becoming more and more challenging. I don't know if people have been noticing that, but that's something that I'm hearing over and over again. So how do we reach this patient and really thrill patients of today? I would argue that number one is to have an application for your patients to directly connect with them. People can order a $3 hamburger using an app, and not just McDonald's or a big chain. Pretty much every business outside of dentistry has an app to connect with their consumers. And the reason why is because it has increased retention of customers. It increases people's buying behavior, and you can consolidate all of your data and notifications into one place. So James Brown has a 20% chance of showing up for his appointments, being able to send messages through an application, securely message back and forth with James, and make sure that James has communicated with you to leverage that information directly through a mobile application is the best way to connect with consumers today. This is from Dental News, right? It says why your app needs a practice. Offering a mobile app demonstrates a commitment to modern patient-centered care, which can differentiate your practice from competitors and attract tech-savvy patients, right? So, it's very convenient, offers 24/7, 365 availability, not necessarily by you. You can have AI chatbots that respond to patients. They can do online scheduling, right? Pay their bills, fill out forms, and it dramatically increases retention. So, this is showing basically what we talked about before. If you're looking at your net new patient growth and you and you want to follow up with lost patients, being able to have a simple graph like this, again, it's not about having too much information. It's about having the right information at your fingertips all of the time. So being able to just quickly see, oh, we've lost more new patients now. Let's do some reactivation calls. Being able to pull it up and call patients or email them or securely message them is vitally important. So let's talk about 4 ways to actually put this into practice. Number 1 is snapshots of time versus real time. Like I mentioned before, when I was selling my practices, I had no idea what my profitability was. I would meet with my accountant quarterly, and they would tell me, things were looking. Basically, they would just say everything looks good. Like that's not enough. Just meeting with your accountant or your consultant to say that things look good. Being able to look in real time what's happening today is vitally important. In fact, I was just in Arizona last week, and I got a call from the regional manager at the DSO that I sold my practices to. So I owned just a fraction of my practice. And they were calling to me about information from 3 months ago. Now, I haven't even been in the practice in 3 months, let alone seen this information. But making decisions on 3-month-old information is completely futile because so much has changed since then. This is a DSO that does not have real-time data analytics, regardless of how much I've tried to talk to them about doing this, right? So it's just impossible to make decisions that are 3 months old. Involving your team, showing versus telling. You can look at this graph here with case acceptance, like the one I showed you, as a dentistry, it's a team sport. If you put that up on a screen, you don't even have to talk about what's going on. Jeff will see that when he's working with I think it was Dr. Miller, the general dentist, case acceptance sucks, right? You don't even have to have the conversation. Now, obviously you have to have the conversation what to do about it. But when you put it up on a screen and you can share KPIs that are important to everybody with them, then all you have to do is just look at the graph and the numbers tell the story. And I like to say you can't change people, but you can change people. And so when you can look at the numbers, you can drive people up so that the performers who want to improve the metrics will see the gaps and seek to fill them, or they'll drive out because if they can see them, they know you can see them, and as long as you're tracking it and talking with what gets measured improves. But if you're measuring 1,000 things, right, nothing's important. So making sure to focus on those key metrics and sharing those key metrics with the people that you want to have improve those metrics by showing it to them. And I'm a big fan about bonuses. Now, this is showing a $100 bill, but oftentimes a $5 bonus, as you'll see, is worth a lot. And driving this through data, some data that I would like to point out: the results of a Gallup study that was done, I believe this was in 2020, for 3 types of employee engagement levels. Engaged employees, which is people who are passionate about their job and driving innovation, moving your practice forward. disengaged employees who are checked out, basically, so they're kind of along for the ride, and actively disengaged employees. And this is where it gets scary. Actively disengaged employees are defined as not just unhappy at work, they're busy acting out their unhappiness. Every day, these workers undermine what their engaged coworkers accomplished. And throughout, this isn't in dentistry, this is throughout all of employment. What was found, was that 30% were actively engaged, 50% were basically just engaged and just along for the ride, and 20% were actively disengaged. That means that 70% of workers in the US are either disengaged or actively disengaged with their work. And so, adding bonus systems to help, I like to think of it as everybody rowing in the same direction because it can shift people, even the actively disengaged, which let's face it, they'll weed themselves out if you have the right incentives and the right data in place. But having the right bonuses in place, I think, can make a big difference. And some things to really be aware of. Number one is to avoid stale and disincentives. Now, if you've tried bonuses and they haven't worked for your practice in the past, it can definitely, because there are some things you want to be aware of. For example, if you have a monthly bonus that you hit 1 month and then don't hit the next month, it can be disincentivizing, right? So I would recommend, if you want to take some notes, and you're interested in bonuses, this would be time to do it. Making them randomized, so making them, they don't have to be, it can be planned randomization, right? But have them be sort of random and fun. And we can talk a little bit about how to do that. Now, if there's leaders in your practice, other dentists, or if you have an office manager, then doing monthly goals and things like that can make sense. But for most of the employees in a dental practice, I would recommend either daily or even better, instant bonuses. Instant doesn't mean you pay it out instantly. It means that you're logging it instantly. That it's like, that dopamine hit of I did this, so I get that. So some sample bonuses, things that we did in my practice. New patients. If you schedule a new patients, you got X dollars. Again, this doesn't have to be a lot. Just recognizing that if you do a good job, you'll be compensated. Same day service. So if a patient came in with a broken tooth, the person that talked to that patient and said, "Hey, would you like to stay and have that done today?" would get $5, and the person that stayed to provide the treatment, who assisted for that treatment, also got $5. Again, not a lot of money, but it adds up when you do it quite a bit. And what you're really doing is showing your employees that when you do more, right, we're all winning, including you. So if you have to stay through lunch or whatever, and it's amazing what $5 can do. Now, I know a lot of dentists will say, well, that's what their wage is for. True. I mean, we obviously have to pay a good wage. However, this tends to be like, I like to say, car payment money if you do it right. And it can be very motivating. And, we're talking about, I've seen it lead to easily a 30 to 50% increase in production just by doing it right. Having competition. So we would often do things like, I don't know, just throw the person that, stays the latest most days or whatever you want to track, right? And then at the end, there, you get different cards, and whoever has the best hand wins. Now, typically speaking, we would have it so that everybody gets a prize, and there's a bunch of, let's say, pick whatever, a bunch of different prizes that are all worth the same amount of money. But the winner gets to pick first. The second person picks second, and so everybody gets a prize, but the order that who gets to select first is what you're actually competing for. And I like to do bonuses for things versus money, mainly because money can be disincentivizing. And there's some studies that very much show that people like things versus things, and things includes food. People, obviously, people who work in dental practice love food. And there was a study done in Israel that showed that in between nothing, pizza, and money and appreciation. Pizza and appreciation were most effective. Money was the least effective. So, just a tip there, making sure to thank everybody every day and incentivizing with pizza is always good. I like to say it probably would be best if you sent it to their home so they can be a hero for their family too. And then one that we did at our practice too, the oil or the once in a lifetime bonus. This was for long time service where you give people, after 5, 10, 15 years, they would get a significant amount of money with two rules. One, they could spend it on something that they wouldn't have done with if they didn't get the money. And number two, they would come back and do a presentation to everybody else of what they did. Again, leveraging the information in your practice through bonuses to drive performance. And again, keeping patients in the loop. This data isn't just for us. It was mentioned in the intro that Jessica nicely said, but I'm very passionate about getting patients into the loop with our care, both through a mobile application where they can get that, and then also being able to directly communicate with them whenever they want to, because a lot of patients are at home at 10 o'clock at night on a Sunday and I got to make a dental appointment. Like we should not physically be there, but we should be there digitally for patients. Now, if you think about case acceptance, when they're in the practice, we're talking, we're showing them intro photos and x-rays and notes. And when they're in the practice, right, it's like they're by the campfire. They're all warm and fuzzy. But right now, by the way, this looks nice because it's 15 below in Minneapolis right now. So it's been a cold day. But every day, every step they take away from your practice, more of that data leaks out of their brain. And having a application, I like to say it's like Professor X from the X-Men, where he can input that information into the patient's brain in their pocket, right? And the patient gets to see what we see and bring it home with them and show their spouse, and they can make third-party arrangements for financing and schedule online, right? So it makes it easy for your team too, because the patient's doing a lot of this work. All the technology is working 24/7, 365 to get patients scheduled. I like to say the three keys to case acceptance and the patient experience are convenience, convenience, and convenience. Like that's what people are looking for. So again, making it easy for people to follow up, pay their bill, add their appointment to their schedule, confirm reminders, communicate directly with your office, triage emergencies from their mobile phone, I think is the best way to grow your practice. And again, this takes all of the data and serves it up to the patient. This again is my practice, and like I kind of alluded to from the phone call I got in Arizona, but right now the place is kind of a dumpster fire, and it purely is because we're not leveraging information to help elevate the patient experience like we talked about today. So, what happened? It was really losing track of the fact that I think that today, with all the information that we have, we can directly connect our data so that we can directly connect with teams and our patients. Now, at Tooth we call that connected dentistry. I think it's the next phase of dentistry. So for my practice, the turnaround plan is pretty simple, right? We're going to use the patient application to increase case acceptance, use the patient communication. So see, the probability that the patient is showing up for their appointment, change the reminder system to increase the patient experience. Also use AI automation to look at employee engagement to reduce turnover. And then using the business intelligence, like we talked about today, looking at profitability, not just production, right? To drive and net new patients to drive the right metrics. So I went through the last part pretty fast. And again, I want to thank you all for your attention.